I decided on Thursday to surprise Brian with a weekend visit. My son and I used to talk 3 times a week. Lately, I was lucky to get a text message every 2 weeks. "He's busy, Janet," my husband Tom said. "He's got a demanding job, a wife. He's building his life." But something felt off. A mother knows. We hadn't seen Brian in 3 months. Every invitation was met with excuses from Melissa. "Brian's working overtime. We have plans that weekend. He's not feeling well." So I didn't ask this time. Tom and I packed a bag Friday morning and started the 4-hour drive to Brian's city. We'd surprise them, take them to dinner, spend the weekend catching up. I called Brian's cell when we were an hour away, let him know we were coming so he wouldn't make other plans. A woman answered, "Not Melissa." "This is Mercy Hospital ICU. Who am I speaking with?" My heart stopped. "I'm Janet Miller. That's my son's phone. Where's Brian?" "Are you his emergency contact?" "Yes. What happened? Where is my son?" "Ma'am, your son is in the intensive care unit. He was admitted last night with critical injuries. You should get here as soon as possible." The phone slipped from my hands. Tom grabbed it, talked to the nurse, got the details while I sat frozen in the passenger seat. Brian had fallen down the stairs at home. Fractured skull, broken ribs, internal bleeding, emergency surgery, critical but stable condition. Tom drove 90 miles an hour the rest of the way. We ran into the ICU, found the nurse's station, gave Brian's name. A nurse with kind eyes led us to room 407. My baby boy lay in a hospital bed surrounded by machines, ventilator breathing for him. Bandages on his head, face swollen and bruised beyond recognition. I grabbed his hand and started crying. "Where's his wife?" Tom asked the nurse. "Where's Melissa?" "She was here earlier this morning. She left around 10. I looked at the clock. It was 3 in the afternoon. Her husband was fighting for his life, and she'd left? Welcome to Elder Justice Revenge Stories. Could you please tell us where you're watching from? And if this is your first time visiting this page, kindly subscribe and turn the notification bell on so you don't miss out on other stories. Trust me, you'll want to hear how this one ends. The doctor came in and explained Brian's condition. Severe head trauma, 3 broken ribs, lacerated spleen that required emergency surgery. He was lucky to be alive. "When can we talk to him?" I asked. "He's sedated. We're keeping him in a medically induced coma to let the brain swelling go down. Could be days before we wake him." I pulled out my phone to call Melissa. She needed to be here, needed to know we'd arrived. Her voice when she answered was flat, distant. "Oh, Janet, you didn't need to come all this way. My son was in a coma, and his wife didn't think I needed to come. I didn't leave Brian's side that first night. Tom tried to convince me to go to a hotel, get some rest. I refused. The nurses were kind. They brought me coffee, a blanket, reassured me that Brian was getting the best care. Around midnight, one of them, Rachel according to her badge, checked Brian's vitals and glanced at me. "You're his mother?" "Yes, Janet. Has anyone else been here, besides you and your husband?" His wife was here this morning, apparently. Before we arrived, Rachel's expression tightened, just for a second. Then it was gone, replaced by professional neutrality. She stayed about 30 minutes after he came out of surgery. Then she had to leave. 30 minutes. Brian had been in critical condition for over 24 hours, and his wife had spent 30 minutes with him. "Do you know what happened?" I asked. "How he fell." The paramedics said he was found at the bottom of the stairs in his home. His wife called 911. She told them he'd tripped and fallen. Something about the way Rachel said it made me look up. "You don't believe that?" She hesitated. "I'm not supposed to speculate, but your son has injuries consistent with a significant fall, multiple points of impact." "What does that mean?" It means he didn't just trip. He fell from a significant height with considerable force. Tom had dozed off in the chair by the window. I stared at my son's battered face, trying to understand. Brian and Melissa had lived in that house for 2 years. He'd gone up and down those stairs thousands of times. He was young, healthy, coordinated. How did he just fall? I called Melissa again the next morning. She didn't answer. I left a voicemail asking her to come to the hospital, that we needed to talk about Brian's care. She texted back 2 hours later. Can't do hospitals. They make me anxious. Keep me updated. Can't do hospitals? Her husband was in the ICU and she couldn't do hospitals? I looked at Tom. Something is very wrong here. He nodded slowly. I know. We just didn't know how wrong. Not yet. Day 2. Brian remained unconscious, sedated, fighting to heal. Tom and I took turns sitting with him, holding his hand, talking to him even though he couldn't respond. The doctors said hearing familiar voices helped. That coma patient sometimes remembered conversations later, so I told him about the garden I was planning at home, about his father's terrible attempts at fixing the garage door, about the neighbor's new puppy, anything to fill the silence. Melissa arrived on day 2 at 11 in the morning. She looked perfect, hairstyled, makeup flawless, designer purse on her arm, like she was going to brunch, not visiting her critically injured husband. Janet, Tom, she nodded at us like we were acquaintances, not family. Melissa, I stood up. We've been trying to reach you. I know, I've been busy. She glanced at Brian, her expression unreadable. Has he woken up? No. The doctors say it could be several more days. She sighed. This is just like him, so dramatic. I stared at her. Dramatic? He's in a coma. He's always been clumsy. I told him 100 times those stairs were dangerous, but he never listens to me. Tom stood up too, his voice tight. Melissa, your husband almost died. Don't you think you should be here? I am here, she said defensively, but I have a job, responsibilities. I can't just drop everything and sit around waiting. She stayed exactly 15 minutes, checked her phone 3 times, barely looked at Brian, then announced she had a meeting and left. The moment she walked out, I saw the nurses at the station exchange glances. The same look Rachel had given me the night before, uncomfortable, knowing. She doesn't seem very concerned, Tom said quietly. No, she doesn't. I walked to the nurses' station. Rachel was there, typing notes into a computer. Can I ask you something? I said. She looked up, cautious. Of course. What do you think happened to my son? Rachel glanced around, making sure no one else was listening. Then she leaned closer. Mrs. Miller, I think you should talk to the doctor about all of Brian's injuries, not just the ones from the fall. My blood ran cold. What do you mean, all of his injuries? Just talk to Dr. Walsh, please. Dr. Stephen Walsh met with me and Tom in a private consultation room. He was in his 50s, with the tired eyes of someone who'd seen too much. I wanted to discuss your son's condition in more detail, he began, pulling up x-rays on a screen. We're listening, I said. Brian's injuries from the fall are severe, but treatable. Fractured skull here, 3 broken ribs here and here, lacerated spleen, all consistent with falling down a flight of stairs. But, I prompted, because there was definitely a but coming. Dr. Walsh pulled up different images. These are older injuries. A healed fracture of the left wrist, approximately 6 months old. 2 ribs that were cracked and healed improperly, maybe 4 months ago. Burns on the forearm, deliberate pattern, possibly from a cigarette or similar object. My nursing training kicked in. I studied the images with growing horror. These injuries were never treated. Not by medical professionals, no. They healed on their own. Poorly, in some cases. Tom's voice was rough. What are you saying, doctor? I'm saying your son has injuries consistent with ongoing physical trauma over an extended period, months, possibly years. The word hung in the air between us. Trauma, abuse. But who? I started, then stopped. I knew who. I just didn't want to believe it. Dr. Walsh handed me a file. I've documented everything, the pattern, the timeline, the nature of the injuries. If you want to pursue this further, you'll need this. Pursue what further? Mrs. Miller, as a medical professional, I'm obligated to report suspected abuse. But when the victim is an adult, the process is complicated, especially when the victim is a man, I finished. He nodded. People don't want to believe women abuse men, but the evidence doesn't lie. Rachel appeared in the doorway. Dr. Walsh, Mrs. Miller, I need to tell you something about what Brian said before he went unconscious. She looked terrified, like she was breaking a rule by speaking. What did he say? I asked. Rachel took a breath. When the paramedics brought him in before surgery, he was conscious for about 3 minutes. He was confused, in pain, but he said something clearly. What? He said, she pushed me. Then he kept repeating, don't tell her I said that. Please don't tell her. The room spun. My daughter-in-law had pushed my son down the stairs, and he was so terrified of her that even while dying, he was trying to protect her. That night, Tom and I sat in our hotel room, and I forced myself to look back at the past 3 years, to see what I'd missed while convincing myself everything was fine. Brian met Melissa at a work conference. She was charming, beautiful, successful in marketing. They dated for 8 months, then got engaged. The wedding was small, intimate. Melissa said she didn't have much family. I remembered thinking that was sad. Now I wondered if it was a red flag. The first year of marriage seemed normal. We saw them for holidays, birthdays, regular family dinners. Brian seemed happy. Then things started changing. When did we last have them over for Sunday dinner? I asked Tom. He thought about it. Not since last spring, over a year ago. And when did Brian stop calling? Around the same time. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through old text messages. The pattern was clear once I looked for it. Year 1, Brian called twice a week, visited once a month. Year 2, calls became less frequent. Visits were always cut short because Melissa had plans. Year 3, only texts, brief, impersonal, busy with work. Talk soon. Everything's fine. Everything wasn't fine. I'd just been too polite to push. If you've ever watched someone you love disappear into a relationship, comment, isolated, and tell us your story. Sometimes the people we lose are still alive, just trapped. Last Christmas, Tom said suddenly, remember Brian had that bruise on his face? I did remember, a purple mark along his jaw. He'd laughed it off. Walked right into a cabinet door, he'd said. I'm so clumsy lately. Melissa had smiled and patted his arm. He really is, always running into things, or being hit. I thought about other visits. Brian wearing long sleeves in summer, limping slightly but saying he'd pulled a muscle at the gym, flinching when Melissa raised her voice. All the signs were there. I just explained them away because the alternative was unthinkable. My son was being abused by his wife. And I'd missed it for 3 years. We're not missing it anymore, Tom said, reading my expression. We're going to help him, even if he doesn't think he can be helped. I nodded, but first, Brian had to wake up, and then he had to be willing to tell the truth. The next morning, I asked Dr. Walsh if I could see Brian's complete medical records. As his mother and emergency contact, I had the right. What I found made me sick. 3 emergency room visits in the past 18 months, all at different hospitals, 6 months ago, broken wrist. Brian claimed he'd fallen off a ladder while cleaning gutters. Treatment notes mentioned he seemed nervous, avoided eye contact. 4 months ago, severe bruising to the ribs. Brian said he'd been in a minor car accident, but there was no police report, no insurance claim. 2 months ago, second-degree burn on his forearm. Brian said he'd spilled boiling water while cooking. The burn pattern was circular, consistent with something being pressed against his skin deliberately. He went to different hospitals each time, I said to Tom, so no one would see the pattern. Or Melissa made sure of that, Tom said grimly. Dr. Walsh had been right. This wasn't a clumsy man having accidents. This was sustained, deliberate abuse. I called Brian's primary care physician, Dr. Martinez. She'd been his doctor since he was 20. Janet, I'm so sorry about Brian, she said when she got on the line. I heard about the fall. Dr. Martinez, when was the last time you saw my son? Silence while she checked records. 2 years ago, annual physical. Everything was normal then. He hasn't been in for checkup since? No, which was unusual for Brian. He was always very good about preventive care, because Melissa wouldn't let him go to a doctor who knew him, who might notice the injuries and ask questions. Did he ever mention any problems at home? I asked. Anything concerning? No, but I haven't spoken to him in 2 years. She paused. Janet, what's going on? I told her about the injuries, the pattern, the evidence of long-term abuse. Dr. Martinez was quiet for a long moment. I had a feeling something was off the last time I saw him. He seemed anxious, kept checking his phone, but when I asked if everything was okay, he said he was fine. He wasn't fine. He was being hurt, and he was too ashamed to say anything. What can I do to help? Document everything. If this goes to court, we'll need medical testimony. Because I was done being polite. Done respecting Melissa's privacy. Done pretending everything was normal. My son was a victim of domestic violence, and I was going to make sure everyone knew it, whether Brian wanted me to or not. On day 3, a young man in his 30s arrived at the ICU, asking for Brian Miller. He introduced himself as Craig Bennett, Brian's co-worker from the software company. I just heard what happened, Craig said, staring at Brian's unconscious form. Oh my God, is he going to be okay? The doctors think so, I said. You work with Brian? Yeah, we share an office, have for 2 years. Craig sat down heavily, his face pale. I should have done something. I should have called someone. Tom and I exchanged glances. Called someone about what? Craig looked at us, then at the door like he was checking if anyone could hear. Can we talk? Somewhere private? We moved to the family waiting room. Craig paced for a moment before speaking. Brian's been coming to work hurt for over a year now, maybe longer. Black eyes, limping, bandaged hands, always had excuses. My heart sank. What kind of excuses? He fell. He tripped over something. He wasn't paying attention and walked into a door. Once he showed up with his arm in a sling and said he'd hurt it playing basketball. Craig shook his head. But Brian doesn't play basketball. Did you ask him what was really happening? I tried. About 6 months ago, he came in with a bruise on his face that looked like a handprint. I pulled him aside and asked if everything was okay at home, if Melissa was hurting him. What did he say? He shut down completely, got angry, told me I didn't know what I was talking about. Said Melissa was wonderful and he was just clumsy. Craig's voice broke, but I saw his face when I said her name. He was terrified. Tom stood up, agitated. Why didn't you report it? Call the police or something. I didn't think they'd believe me. A man being abused by his wife? I thought Brian would deny it, and I'd just make things worse for him. Craig wiped his eyes. I should have tried harder. I should have done something instead of just pretending I didn't notice. Did anyone else at work see the injuries? Everyone saw them, but everyone believed his excuses, or pretended to. It was easier than dealing with the truth. I understood that. I'd done the same thing. We'd all failed Brian, seen the signs and looked away because the reality was too uncomfortable. He's awake sometimes now, I lied. Brian wasn't awake yet, but I needed to know. Has he said anything about wanting to leave her? Craig nodded. 3 weeks ago, he asked me about divorce lawyers, said he was thinking about leaving Melissa, but was scared of what she'd do. 3 weeks ago, right before she pushed him down the stairs, Brian had tried to leave, and Melissa had nearly killed him for it. Melissa showed up that afternoon with a leather folder under her arm. She'd been absent for almost 2 full days. Now she walked in like she owned the place. "Janet, Tom, I need you to sign some paperwork," she said without greeting. "No, how is Brian?" or "Has there been any change?" Just business. She opened the folder and pulled out documents. "This is power of attorney for medical decisions. In case Brian doesn't wake up, someone needs to have legal authority to make choices about his care." I looked at the papers. They would give Melissa complete control over Brian's medical treatment, including end-of-life decisions. "Brian's going to wake up," I said. "Of course he is," Melissa said smoothly, "but we need to be prepared for all possibilities. It's just practical." "Why do you need us to sign? You're his wife." "The hospital wants family consensus. It's cleaner if everyone's on the same page." I looked at Tom. He shook his head slightly. "I'm not signing this," I said. Melissa's expression changed. Just for a second, her mask slipped. I saw anger flash across her face, raw and cold. "You're making this harder than it needs to be, Janet. My son is in a coma. Everything about this is hard. He's my husband. I know what's best for him." "Do you?" The words came out sharper than I intended. "Because the best thing for him would have been not pushing him down the stairs." Silence. Melissa stared at me, her face completely blank. "What did you just say?" "Brian told the paramedics you pushed him before he lost consciousness." "That's ridiculous. He was confused from the head injury. He didn't know what he was saying." "He knew exactly what he was saying." Melissa's jaw tightened. "I'm not going to stand here and be accused of something I didn't do. My husband fell. It was an accident. And when he wakes up, he'll tell you that himself." She grabbed the unsigned papers and left without another word. If you've ever had to stand up to someone who was trying to control a situation through intimidation, comment "stood up" and tell us how you found the courage. Sometimes protecting someone means refusing to back down. After she was gone, Nurse Rachel approached me quietly. "Mrs. Miller, I need to tell you something. Yesterday, before you and your husband arrived, Melissa was asking Dr. Walsh about end-of-life options." My blood ran cold. "What kind of options?" "Removing life support, stopping treatment. She wanted to know how long the hospital would keep Brian on the ventilator if he didn't improve." "He's only been here 3 days." "I know. Dr. Walsh told her it was far too early for those conversations. Brian's condition is stable and improving," but she kept pushing. Tom grabbed my arm. "She wants him to die. She pushed him down the stairs, and now she wants to finish the job before he can tell anyone what really happened." I looked through the window at my son, unconscious, vulnerable, completely at the mercy of the woman who'd tried to kill him. "We need to call the police," I said, "right now, before she tries again." Rachel nodded. "I already called them. There's a detective on her way. Her name is Lisa Monroe. She specializes in domestic violence cases." Thank God for nurses who paid attention, who believed victims even when the victims couldn't speak for themselves. "There's one more thing," Rachel said. The hospital has security cameras in all the ICU rooms for patient safety. I checked the footage from when Melissa visited earlier today, before you arrived. What did you see? You should wait for the detective. But Mrs. Miller, I think she threatened him. Your son is unconscious, and she was leaning over his bed saying something. The audio isn't clear, but her body language, it wasn't concern. It was menace. Melissa had stood over my unconscious son and threatened him. My child was in danger, and I was the only one who could protect him. The detective needed to get here fast. Detective Lisa Monroe arrived within an hour. She was in her 40s, sharp-eyed, with the no-nonsense demeanor of someone who'd seen too many victims ignored. Tell me everything, she said. I told her about the injuries, the pattern of abuse, Craig's testimony, Brian's words to the paramedics, Melissa's attempt to get power of attorney and discuss end-of-life options after only 3 days. Detective Monroe took notes, asked questions, requested copies of the medical records. I'm going to be honest with you, Mrs. Miller. Domestic violence cases where the victim is male are incredibly difficult to prosecute. Juries don't want to believe it. Defense attorneys use shame and stigma against the victim. But you believe me? I believe the evidence, and I'm going to investigate this thoroughly. She paused. I'd like to look into Melissa's background, see if there's any history of violence. I was thinking the same thing, I said. I want to hire a private investigator. Do it. Sometimes private investigators find things we can't access without warrants. I hired someone that afternoon, a woman named Patricia Chen, who specialized in background investigations. I gave her everything I knew about Melissa Harrison Miller. Patricia called me back 2 days later. Mrs. Miller, you need to hear this. Melissa was engaged before she married your son. I didn't know that. His name was David Richardson. He died 4 years ago in a tragic accident. Fell off a ladder while cleaning gutters. My stomach dropped. Fell? According to the police report, yes. Melissa was home at the time. She called 911. He died at the scene from head trauma. Just like Brian had nearly died from head trauma after falling downstairs. If you've ever had to investigate someone to protect a loved one, comment investigated and share what you found. Sometimes the truth is buried in patterns we don't want to see. There's more, Patricia continued. David had a life insurance policy, $250,000. Melissa was the beneficiary. She collected the full amount. Did anyone suspect her? David's family did. His sister filed a complaint with the police saying David was afraid of Melissa, that she'd been violent. But there was no evidence, and Melissa had a solid alibi. She was home when he fell. What happened after? Melissa moved to a new city 6 months later. That's where she met your son, at a work conference. She'd killed her fiancé, collected the insurance money, moved away, and found a new victim, Brian, and now she was trying to finish what she'd started. On day 7, the doctors started reducing Brian's sedation. They wanted to bring him out of the medically induced coma slowly, let him wake up naturally. I was sitting by his bed, reading aloud from a mystery novel he'd loved as a teenager, when his fingers twitched. Tom, get the nurse. Brian's eyes moved under his closed lids. His hand squeezed mine weakly. Brian, sweetheart, can you hear me? It's Mom. You're safe. You're in the hospital. His eyes opened, unfocused at first, then finding my face. Recognition dawned, and immediately, panic. He tried to sit up, groaned in pain, fell back against the pillows. His eyes darted around the room frantically. Where's Melissa? His voice was hoarse from the ventilator tube they'd removed yesterday. Is she here? Not, Mom, I'm so glad to see you. Not, what happened? Not, where am I? His first words were asking where his abuser was. My heart broke completely. "She's not here, baby. It's just me and Dad. You're safe." Brian's whole body relaxed. Then tears started running down his face. "I'm sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry." Dr. Walsh came in, checked Brian's vitals, his responses, his cognitive function. Everything looked good considering the severity of his injuries. "You're a very lucky man, Brian," the doctor said. "You're going to make a full recovery." After the doctor left, Brian looked at me with such shame I could barely stand it. "I know you know," he whispered, "about Melissa, about what she does." "How long?" I asked gently. "Since about 6 months after we got married. It started small, slapping. Then it got worse." He closed his eyes. I kept thinking I could fix it, make her happy, stop doing whatever was making her angry. "Honey, you didn't do anything wrong. Abusers don't need a reason." "I'm a man. I should have been able to stop her, defend myself." "She had all the power in your relationship. That's not about physical strength. It's about control." Tom wiped his eyes. "Why didn't you tell us? We would have helped you." "Because I was ashamed. Because I thought you'd think I was weak. Because Melissa said if I ever told anyone, she'd say I was the one hitting her. Who would believe a man over a woman?" He was right. Society wouldn't have believed him. We barely believed it ourselves, even with all the evidence. "What happened the night you fell?" I asked. Brian's face crumpled. "I told her I wanted a divorce. I said I couldn't do it anymore. She got so angry, started screaming. I tried to walk away, and she followed me to the stairs. And she pushed me. I remember falling, the pain, then nothing until I woke up here." He grabbed my hand. "Mom, you can't tell the police. If she finds out I told you what really happened, she'll what, Brian? Kill you? She already tried." "You don't understand. She said she'd ruin me if I ever left. She'd tell everyone I abused her. I'd lose my job, my reputation, everything. We have evidence, medical records, witness statements, security footage of her threatening you while you were unconscious." Brian's eyes widened. "Security footage? The hospital has cameras. Detective Monroe has been building a case. No, you have to stop this. I can handle Melissa. I just need—" The door opened. Melissa walked in. The fear on Brian's face was immediate and visceral. He actually flinched, tried to make himself smaller in the bed, and Melissa smiled. "Hello, darling. I'm so glad you're finally awake. We have so much to talk about." Melissa walked to Brian's bedside like she owned him. I stood up, placing myself between them. "Visiting hours are over," I said. "I'm his wife." "There are no visiting hours for me." She looked past me at Brian. "Baby, you look terrible. How are you feeling?" Brian couldn't even look at her. He stared at the ceiling, his breathing shallow. "He needs rest," Tom said, standing beside me. "You should come back tomorrow." "I'm not leaving until I talk to my husband. Alone." "That's not happening," I said firmly. Melissa's expression hardened. "You have no legal right to keep me from my husband, unless Brian himself tells me to leave." She looked at Brian expectantly. He said nothing, just lay there, frozen with fear. "See, he wants me here. Now, if you'll excuse us—" "No." The word came out stronger than I felt. "You're not going to be alone with him." "This is ridiculous." Melissa pulled out her phone. "I'm calling hospital administration. You can't just—" "Mrs. Miller?" Nurse Rachel appeared in the doorway with Detective Monroe right behind her. Thank God. Detective Monroe showed her badge. "Melissa Miller? I'm Detective Lisa Monroe. I'd like to ask you some questions about the night your husband was injured." Melissa's face went carefully blank. "Of course. Anything to help. Though I don't know what else I can tell you. It was an accident. Brian fell." Is there somewhere private we can talk? The detective asked. We can talk here. I have nothing to hide. Melissa glanced at Brian. Right, honey? Tell them it was an accident. Brian's silence was deafening. Mr. Miller, do you feel safe right now? Detective Monroe asked. It was the right question, the only question that mattered. Brian finally looked at the detective. Tears were streaming down his face. No, he whispered. Those two words shattered Melissa's control. Are you serious right now? I've been taking care of you, Brian. I called 911. I saved your life. You pushed me down the stairs, Brian said, his voice breaking. You tried to kill me. That's a lie. He's confused from the head injury. He doesn't know what he's saying. He said the same thing to the paramedics, I said, before surgery, when his head was clear enough to tell the truth. Melissa rounded on me, her mask completely gone now. Pure rage contorted her features. You did this. You turned him against me. He was fine until you showed up. He was in a coma until I showed up. I shot back, where you left him alone to die. Detective Monroe stepped between us. Mrs. Miller, I'm going to need you to come down to the station and answer some questions. Am I under arrest? Not at this time, but I strongly suggest you cooperate. Melissa looked at Brian one more time. You're making a huge mistake. When you come to your senses, I'll be waiting. But this, she gestured at all of us, this won't end well for you. It sounded like concern, but it was a threat. We all heard it. After Melissa left with the detective, Brian broke down completely, sobbing so hard the monitors started beeping. A nurse came in, checked his vitals, gave him something to calm down. I'm sorry, he kept saying. I'm so sorry. You have nothing to be sorry for, Tom said, his voice thick with emotion. Nothing. I should have told you. I should have left. I just kept thinking if I tried harder, if I was better, she'd stop. I sat on the edge of his bed and held him while he cried. My 35-year-old son, reduced to this by someone who was supposed to love him. She's going to say I'm lying, Brian said when he could talk again. She's going to make me look crazy or abusive. Everyone will believe her. We have evidence, I said. Medical records showing years of injuries. Your coworker saw the bruises. The hospital staff noticed her behavior. It won't matter. She's beautiful and charming, and I'm just a victim, I finished. You're a victim of domestic violence, Brian. That's not shameful. That's survival. If you've ever witnessed someone being threatened and had to decide whether to intervene, comment witness and tell us what you did. Sometimes the bravest thing we can do is refuse to look away from someone else's pain. An hour later, Detective Monroe returned. Melissa lawyered up immediately, she said, denied everything, but I have something to show you. She pulled out her tablet and played security footage from Brian's hospital room, Melissa leaning over Brian's bed when he was still unconscious. The timestamp showed it was from 2 days ago, before we'd arrived. The audio was faint, but clear enough. Melissa's voice, if you wake up and tell anyone what really happened, I'll destroy you. I'll say you attacked me first. I'll say you're unstable, that the head injury made you violent. They'll believe me over you. They always do. She straightened up, smoothed her hair, and left the room. Brian watched the footage with horror. I don't even remember that. I was unconscious. She was threatening you anyway, Detective Monroe said. Making sure that if you woke up, you'd be too scared to tell the truth. This is classic abuser behavior, intimidation and control. Can you arrest her for that? Tom asked. For threatening an unconscious person? It's complicated, but combined with everything else, it shows a pattern, intent, consciousness of guilt. She looked at Brian. I need you to make a formal statement. Tell me everything, starting from the beginning. Brian looked terrified. If I do this, she'll retaliate. She'll be in custody, Detective Monroe interrupted. I'm building a case for attempted murder, domestic violence, and possibly murder in connection with her previous fiancé's death. But I need you to be brave enough to tell your story. What if no one believes me? I believe you, I said. I believe you, Tom echoed. I believe you, Nurse Rachel said from the doorway. I believe you, Craig said. He'd returned for another visit and was standing in the hallway. Detective Monroe nodded. And I believe you. The evidence believes you. Your body believes you. Now you need to believe yourself. Brian closed his eyes, took a shaking breath. Okay, he whispered. Okay, I'll tell you everything. And for the next 2 hours, my son recounted 3 years of hell. Every slap, every punch, every threat, the escalating violence, the isolation from friends and family, the fear that kept him silent. He told the truth, finally, and Detective Monroe recorded every word for the case that would put Melissa away. Detective Monroe worked fast. Within 48 hours of Brian's statement, she had built a case that was impossible to ignore. The security footage of Melissa threatening Brian while he was unconscious, medical records documenting 3 years of injuries, Craig's written statement about the bruises and excuses, testimony from 3 different ER doctors who treated Brian's accidents, and the exhumation order for David Richardson's body. Melissa's previous fiancé had been buried 4 years ago after his accidental fall from a ladder. Detective Monroe had convinced a judge that there was probable cause to investigate his death as a homicide. The patterns are identical, she told me. Brian fell downstairs. David fell from a ladder. Both had trauma, both while alone with Melissa. Both had life insurance policies with Melissa as beneficiary. How much was Brian's policy worth? I asked. $400,000. Melissa took it out 2 years ago without telling him. She has power of attorney, so she didn't need his signature. My son was worth more to her dead than alive. The arrest happened on day 10 of Brian's hospitalization. Melissa showed up at the ICU with flowers and a balloon that said, "Get well soon." Detective Monroe was waiting with 2 uniformed officers. "Melissa Miller, you're under arrest for attempted murder, domestic violence, assault with intent to cause great bodily harm, and fraud." The flowers dropped from Melissa's hands. "This is insane. I didn't do anything. You have the right to remain silent. Brian is lying. His mother manipulated him into saying those things. She's always hated me." They handcuffed her right there in the ICU hallway. Nurses and visitors watched as she was led away, still protesting her innocence. "You're making a mistake," she screamed. "I'm the victim here. Brian attacked me, and I defended myself." But there was no evidence of that. No injuries on Melissa. No defensive wounds. Nothing but her word against the mountain of evidence showing what she'd done. Brian watched from his hospital bed as his abuser was taken into custody. He didn't look triumphant. He looked exhausted. "Is it really over?" he asked. "The hard part's just beginning," I said honestly. "But you're not alone anymore. You don't have to protect her or be afraid of her." For the first time in 3 years, my son was safe. The physical recovery took 6 weeks. Brian's skull fracture healed. His ribs mended. The internal bleeding resolved. His body recovered. The emotional healing would take much longer. "I should have been stronger," Brian said during one of our conversations. We were at home now. He'd moved back into his childhood bedroom while he recovered. I should have just left. "Leaving an abuser is the most dangerous time," I said. I'd been reading everything I could about domestic violence. "She escalated when you tried. That's what they do. But I'm a man. I should have been able to defend myself." She had all the power, Brian. Financial control, emotional manipulation, threats to destroy your reputation. That's not about muscles. That's about systematic abuse. He started therapy 3 times a week, a psychologist who specialized in trauma and domestic violence. Slowly, Brian started understanding that what happened to him wasn't his fault. He learned about trauma bonding, why victims stay, why they protect their abusers, why shame keeps them silent. Male victims face stigma that female victims don't, his therapist explained to me. Society tells men they can't be victims, that they should be strong enough to stop it. It's incredibly damaging. Brian filed for divorce while Melissa was in jail awaiting trial, filed a restraining order, changed all his passwords, bank accounts, locks, started reclaiming his life piece by piece. Then came another revelation. Detective Monroe called with news. "We found Melissa's affair partner," she said. "His name is Jordan Reed. He had no idea Melissa was married. She told him she was single, worked in marketing, traveled a lot for business." How long were they seeing each other? 8 months. And here's the interesting part. Melissa told Jordan she was about to come into a large inheritance. $400,000. She suggested they move to Europe together after she got the money. The life insurance. Melissa had been planning her future with her affair partner, funded by Brian's death. It made the betrayal complete. She hadn't just abused him. She'd planned to kill him and start a new life with someone else. But instead, she was sitting in jail facing 25 years to life, and Brian was learning to believe he deserved better than what she'd given him. The trial lasted 3 weeks. I sat in the courtroom every single day, Brian on one side, Tom on the other. Melissa's defense attorney tried everything, claimed Brian was the real abuser, said he'd attacked Melissa and she'd defended herself, suggested his injuries were self-inflicted to frame her, but the evidence was overwhelming. Medical records showing years of abuse, security footage of Melissa threatening an unconscious Brian, testimony from Craig, the ER doctors, Brian's therapist, financial records showing the secret life insurance policy and the affair. And then David Richardson's exhumed body revealed elevated levels of a sedative in his bone tissue. He'd been drugged before his fall. Melissa had murdered her previous fiancé, nearly murdered Brian, and would have killed again if given the chance. The jury deliberated for 4 hours, guilty on all counts. The judge sentenced her to 18 years for attempted murder, with additional time for assault, fraud, and conspiracy. With good behavior, she'd be eligible for parole in 15 years. David Richardson's family filed to reopen his case as a homicide. Melissa would likely face additional charges in that death. She was led out of the courtroom in handcuffs, still maintaining her innocence, still blaming everyone else. Brian cried, not from sadness, from relief. 6 months after the sentencing, Brian had his own apartment again, still in therapy, but doing better. He'd lost weight, he'd been stress carrying, started jogging, smiled more, and he'd started speaking publicly about domestic violence against men. "Society tells us men can't be victims," he said at his first speaking engagement at a domestic violence awareness event. "That we should be strong enough to stop it. But abuse isn't about physical strength. It's about psychological control, manipulation, and fear." He shared his story, the shame, the isolation, the fear that no one would believe him. "If my mother hadn't shown up unannounced that day, I'd probably be dead," he said. "Melissa was planning to take me off life support before I could wake up and tell the truth." The audience was silent. Some people were crying. After the event, 3 men approached Brian privately. All of them were in abusive relationships. All of them had been too ashamed to ask for help. Brian gave them resources, hotline numbers, shelter information, validation that their experiences were real. He was turning his trauma into purpose. I watched my son help others find the courage he'd needed, and I was so proud I could barely speak. One afternoon, Brian came over for dinner. Our regular Sunday tradition was back. He looked healthier than he had in years. "I got a promotion at work," he said, "and I've been seeing someone. Nothing serious yet, but she's kind, patient, safe. I'm so happy for you, sweetheart. Mom, I never thanked you properly for not giving up on me, for fighting for me when I couldn't fight for myself." That's what mothers do. Not all of them. Some people's families tell them to stay quiet, keep the peace, don't make waves. You made waves. You saved my life. I thought about that day in the ICU, finding Brian alone, broken, nearly dead, his wife nowhere to be found. If I hadn't made that unannounced visit, if I'd called first and let Melissa prepare an excuse, Brian would be dead. Sometimes the best decisions are the ones we make on instinct. "You deserve to be safe and loved," I told him. "Never forget that." "I'm learning," he said, finally learning. Melissa sent Brian a letter from prison. He burned it without reading it. He didn't owe her closure, didn't owe her forgiveness, didn't owe her anything. He owed himself healing, and that's exactly what he was doing. If you found this story powerful and want to see more real-life accounts of domestic violence, family courage, and the strength to speak up when someone needs help, please subscribe to Elder Justice Revenge Stories and turn on the notification bell. Your support helps us share stories that matter. Drop a comment below and let us know. Have you ever had to fight for someone who couldn't fight for themselves? Have you ever noticed signs of abuse that others ignored? We'd love to hear your story. Thank you for watching, and remember, abuse has no gender. If you suspect someone is being hurt, speak up. Your intervention might save a life.